Meissner makers, it's Jennifer at Meissner Sewing and Vacuum Centers, and I'm so excited to share with you another one of our Festival of Savings specials. So today we're going to be taking a look at the Brother ScanNCut, and I have a very special guest presenter. Kathleen is going to take you through some of the bells and whistles of this amazing machine. So take it away, Kathleen.
Well, hi everybody. I think a few of you know me. I'm Kathleen with Meissner Sewing here in Roseville. I'm going to show you a few things about the ScanNCut DX, which is the latest version of the ScanNCut by Brother. It's the 325 DX. These are going to be shown at the Quilt, Craft, and Sewing Festival in Sacramento, in Sacramento on March 24th through the 26th. I'm going to show you how to fussy cut some fabric out of this. So what we're going to do is I'm going to take this little beloved piece of fabric, just throw it down anywhere, no problem. Press this down so it stays nice and snug. Now we're going to put it in the machine, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually just cut out the logo. So from here, I'm going to scan, and I'm going to scan to direct cut, and it's going to scan it in. Okay, and it's perfectly outlined with the portion that I want to cut out. So I'm going to hit start. It's going to test, because it has an auto depth finder, it's going to test how deep it is. It's going to test on the fabric. It's going to see about how deep it is, and when it sees how deep it is, and it will start to cut. And there we go. Before you take it off the mat, you want to make sure that it is actually cut. So you want to pull up a corner and pull it off. And if you see that it is cut and you pull this entire thing off, that means that it is complete. If you had taken it off and it wasn't fully cut, you can never get it back in the same spot. So make sure that you check this first. Pull this up underneath, pull it off, and you've got your applique. So there we are. I hope we get to see you out at the Quilt, Craft, and Sewing Festival out there in Sacramento on March 24th through the 26th. And you all have a wonderful day. Take care. Nice to see you.
Thank you, Kathleen. That was an amazing way to be able to use your ScanNCut. Now stay with us since you're here anyway. Remember that if you like, share, or comment on this video, you're going to be entered into our weekly drawings. Now I hope you have a cup of coffee in place, because we're going to now take you into some of the creative uses for your ScanNCut with a little Throwback Thursday video. Are you ready? So in today's session, we're going to be going through a project process called Hot Mess. Now, personally, I would recommend that you don't try to follow along with us today. Watch through the entirety of the video. If this is something that you're going to want to do, and you will, because it's a little bit addictive, don't you think?
Yes, it is.
Then I would say gather up your materials and get ready, because this is a great project for the holidays, for your decorating, for gift giving, and it's not just a holiday thing. This is something that you'll be able to use throughout the year. We'll probably come back and revisit this again, I think, because It was an awful lot of fun. So Jody, exactly what is Hot Mess? Can you tell our Meissner makers about this process?
Yes, what Hot Mess is if you'll notice in the background, there's all these different colors, and what it is we've used acrylic and we've splotched it here, there, and whatever, brushstroked it out, let it dry. And then I think the hardest part was picking the design.
It was.
I spent a long time going, oh, how would that look? Well, how would that? So I think I have 72 in my folder right now of what I wanted to do. Then we cut it out and we transfer it on there. We apply a finish on top of it, let it dry, pull off of our transfer, and voila, we have Hot Mess.
And we're going to take you step by step through creating your own Hot Mess canvas, as well as some tips on the supplies that you'll want to have on hand. So to start with, this is a ScanNCut project, or really any digital die cutter will work. But let me tell you why I prefer to work with ScanNCut for this process and a couple of other things. One of the main advantages of the ScanNCut versus some of the other cutters that are out there is that it scans. Now, why is that a big deal? Well, over the weekend, I was working on some of the projects from the Embellish License to Create bundle. So There was one project, or there is one project where you're cutting 3 different colors of vinyl. Now, if I had just small bits of vinyl left at home, I could cut this, believe, from scraps. However, if I can't scan my mat ahead of time, I won't know exactly where that gold vinyl happens to be. So by having that scanning process, I can see on my mat, and we'll show you this, exactly where I've positioned my vinyl so that I can cut into that vinyl, or maybe it's a patterned vinyl, and I want to be able to fussy cut over that patterned vinyl. I can see exactly where my cut file is going to end up. So to me, that's a huge, huge advantage.
Also, if you're fussy cutting fabric, that's
Exactly.
a huge advantage.
Yep.
Because you can cut out exactly what you want and not have to go, oh, I have to move it here, I have to move it there. You scan in your fabric and you move it around and you're ready to go.
Yes. So for those of you that have ScanNCuts in the box, now is the time to get it out of the box.
Yes.
And if you're a little nervous about that, especially right now where, there aren't a lot of classes and things that are going on, may I introduce you to, go ahead and hold that up, Jody, to the ScanNCut playbook. Now, I know you've gone through this
Yes.
book almost front to back.
Yes,
And
yes.
what are your thoughts on this book?
I actually love it. It's very detailed. So what I did was I read the book first, and then I sat down in my ScanNCut and go touch, 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 touch. And it was like, oh, okay, so why am I afraid of this all this time? Or why is this being such a daunting job to do? And it's like, it's easy peasy if you understand the logic of this is 1, this is 2, this is 3. There's killer features on this machine, so it's a lot of fun. I just spent 3 days playing a whole lot with my ScanNCut. But this, I really do recommend. This is a really good book.
And I think the setup instructions at the beginning were really good. So again, if you haven't taken it out of the box, or you've taken it out of the box and that's as far as you've gone, it will walk you through step by step how to set it up, and also how to set up your ScanNCut canvas. The canvas is the PC software program that is included at no charge. And within Canvas, and we will take a look at that, you can import SVG files, you can combine them, you can do some manipulating, you can resize them, and get them ready so that you know exactly what's going to happen when that file comes to the machine for cutting. So it's a very powerful tool to have, and it came for free with your ScanNCut. So it's definitely something that you want to get set up and have ready to go.
And there's 2 versions.
Mm-hmm.
There's the online.
Yep.
And there's the one that you work off your desktop. And they don't work necessarily the same, so they do have a little bit of different features. So you really kind of want both of them.
Absolutely. And they install at the same time.
Yep.
So there's no extra work at all. When it requires you to be online, it will ask you, right? For those features, you need to be online. Would you like to be online? And you have that choice. So it's really very, very simple, user-friendly. Read the instructions on the screen and you're ready to go. So we've talked a little bit about what it is and the advantages. What would you do with it? Today we're going to make reverse stencils, so to speak, but you can cut vinyl, you can cut paper, you can make iron-ons, you can cut fabric if you're doing embroidered appliques. For those of you that followed along with us during Vintage Boardwalk, we use the ScanNCut to pre-cut the applique shapes for our machine embroidery. But some other things that you can do with the ScanNCut. There's an embossing toolkit that you can use. So if you're working with lightweight metals and you want to create decorative panels that can be used for different craft purposes, the embossing kit is great for that. There's a rhinestone kit as well. So if you want to make your own rhinestone appliques, ScanNCut will do that for you. You can also put pens or markers in the blade holder. So if you want some beautiful looking script, perfect example. I was working on some of the embellished license to create projects over the weekend, and there are a couple of pieces that work with chalkboard vinyl. My handwriting is not as beautiful as it once was. I'm thinking sticking a pen down in there and writing on my vinyl ahead of time would definitely be the way that I would go the next time. If you're creating gift cards, great way to do it. There's a calligraphy font that's available for this machine. If you are, I'm like big into home deck because I have a little more time at home like the rest of you, the roll feeder will give you the tools that you need to be able to cut approximately a 6 foot single length at a time. So if you like this technique where we're doing some reverse stenciling and you're thinking, ooh, I have a spot on a wall in my home where this would work, this is going to be the perfect tool for you to use to create those types of designs. Now, at the moment, there are 3 different ScanNCut versions available for you in any of our 5 Meissner store locations. We are using the ScanNCut DX 230D. I have to look because the numbers are so similar. I like this particular version because it does give me the wows. I like having the Disney designs in here. This one does come with my roll feeder. It comes with several mats. It comes with the tool set that we see here. There is a version up and there is a version down. The version up is basically the 2021 version of the machine. It includes a new fabric mat and a vinyl blade set. Both of those things right now are coming with this version of the ScanNCut while supplies last. And we'll get back to why you want this vinyl blade shortly. Yes. Actually, why don't you talk about that, Jody?
The vinyl blade. Yes. So the last 3 days, I've been playing with a lot of vinyl. And it was a matter of bringing in my design, setting it up, and then doing my test cut. And when my test cut pulled up, I just pushed start. That was it. I didn't have to adjust a single thing. It automatically knew how deep to cut. Now, another cool feature on this is it has a half cut, or it'll do a full cut. And when you're doing vinyl, you only want a half cut because you don't want to cut through the backing, whether you're doing vinyl that is heat transfer vinyl or just this vinyl that we're going to be using today. You don't want to cut through all of it because first of all, when you cut through all of it, you got to take off the back.
Exactly.
And it stays on your mat and it's just extra work.
Yeah. So this is an iron-on. It's cut this way with a half cut. We remove the excess, which we'll demonstrate for you. It's called weeding. And now you have a transfer that you would take to whatever fiber you want to adhere it to and then just iron it in place. Now, with this design, you can see in particular where the eye is dotted. If all of this came apart, if you didn't have your carrier sheet still attached, you'd have to figure out where to put that eye in relation to the word believe. Now, for this project, that's not a big deal. But cameraman Joel, can you see the little black t-shirt right here? It says, "'Tis the season to sparkle." So you can see on something like this that has a lot of, several lines of text, why it would be so important to make sure that you have that carrier sheet still attached to your vinyl so that when you iron it on, it all ends up exactly where you wanted it. It's just like testing for your embroidery to get that embroidery design in exactly the right spot. Okay, so let's see. I think we have covered all of the tools that we're going to be using. So the bare basics for hot mess canvas. You need a canvas. You're going to want some acrylic paint. We're going to talk more about that in a moment. You will need some temporary vinyl, or I would recommend that you use, this is the vinyl for making stencils, right? So I would recommend that you have some of that on hand because we do need to be able to remove it. You're also going to need some transfer tape, and you will need your ScanNCut, your weeding tools. Not required, but strongly recommended is also a light box, and we'll show you why that's so important when we get ready to weed. Now, the step-by-steps that we're going to do today, we're going to work in for time purposes on a small board, but I am going to show you some things working with a larger board. So we will have the 12 by 24 mat that we're going to be referring back and forth to when you're working on some of the larger hot mess canvas boards. So I think that's everything that we need for our project today. Oh, brushes. Brushes are helpful unless you want to finger paint those boards. You're definitely going to want to have some brushes. So canvas, acrylic, brushes, your ScanNCut, your weeding tools, an SVG file that you love, and we'll suggest some resources for that, your vinyl, your transfer tape, and a cup of coffee. All right, cameraman Joel, are we ready to create?
Yep.
All right, let's move over to the machine and make some magic.
Okay, so these are the tools that we need to start off with. We have a stretched canvas board, and it doesn't have to be stretched canvas. It can be a flat canvas board. I would suggest that you have one that is primed. Ask me how I know. I just spent the weekend fighting with a unprimed one. It's a lot rougher, so it'll make you a lot happier if you already have a primed one. You need acrylic paints. Choose colors that you like. Think about what you're going to do, where it's going to go. Is it going to be a holiday? Is it going to be a wall hanging, a decoration? Acrylic or sponge brushes, and a palette plate, also known as a paper plate with wax on it, so that the paint doesn't seep through it. Okay, so how are you going to start off? As you are going to shake your paints, because all paints settle at the bottom. Squirt it out in 3 different or 5 different piles. Take your brushes, dab it, and then just go about adding paint.
You know what? Just do it.
Just do it?
Just do it.
Okay, let's just do it. And you really don't even have to clean your brushes. You can do it all with one brush if that's what you'd like to do. And you don't have to have a whole lot on there. I'm gonna dirty all your brushes. You brought them for me to play with. You want to make sure that you don't have any ridges, because when you go to put your design on, you want to make sure that it is kind of smooth. If you notice you put paint on top of some of the other colors, you create new ones, which can be a lot of fun. This is called a hot mess for a reason. It doesn't have to be perfect. We're just adding color. You do want to make sure you cover your whole board, because you never know where your words are going to land. Some green up there. And basically there's your hot mess paint. Now if I wanted a little bit more green, I would now just come back and add in some more green for highlights. You know what you're going to do with this? I kind of like this. Right, it is?
Looking good.
Okay. Anything else you want to add to it?
Nope, I think that's phenomenal, just like it is.
Okay, so that's how you do your hot mess. Now I'm going to show you some of the other boards that Jennifer had prepared already. That's a great Christmas one. Mm-hmm. My favorite colors. Look how cool that is. So you can swish it around, you can stripe it, you can smoosh it around. It doesn't have to be any one direction, because you're going to cover a lot of it. So when you're doing your design and you're thinking about where you want to put your paints and your colors, keep in mind about how big your design and your words are going to be. This is a hot mess that I did a couple of months ago. And I have big letters, so you're seeing a lot more of the background color. And on this one, I kind of turned all my paints into mud. and smooshed it around a lot so that I got more of a blended going from one color to the other. So there's several different ways that you can do this technique. Next, we need to let it dry. Because if you go to try to put it on now, nothing's going to stick to it. You can use a hairdryer to blow this dry. Takes about 15-20 minutes, and then I would completely wait for it to completely cool down before I went any further and started putting my vinyl on it.
So we are using an adhesive vinyl. This is one that just has a sticky side. It does not need to be heat set. If when you're looking at your vinyl, you're not sure which side is the sticky side and which side is the carrier sheet, just pull up a little corner. Here's the sticky, okay? I want the sticky facing the mat. Because the sticky is facing the mat, I don't need to mirror image my design when I cut it. Okay, so we're gonna position our mat in our machine, and I'm gonna go ahead and load it. Now you can load it now or you can load it after you have your design selected. It really doesn't matter. Now my design or my SVG file is on a USB stick. This is a design that I purchased online from a company called Craft Genesis, and you will find all sorts of different SVG files there and available for you. So here's my SVG file. I'm going to just follow the prompts on my screen and touch OK. Now you can see that the design takes up about 1/4 of the mat. This is a 12 by 12 mat, so that tells me that this is approximately 3 by 3. The canvas that we painted a little earlier is about an 8-inch square piece. So I'm going to choose Edit, Object Edit, and notice there's a red box around the file that tells me that this is one object. And I will need to make that one object larger so that it'll be proportionate when we position it on our canvas. I'm going to choose the plus icon and notice that both the height and the width are adjusting at the same time, so it's giving me a proportionate design change. A little too large for our canvas. Let's shrink that in a bit, somewhere in that neighborhood. And I'm going to touch OK. And OK again to take me back out to the main screen. Touch OK because I'm ready now to cut my canvas. I do want to make sure that I have the carrier sheet left. Now the machine happens to be set for half cut and we are now ready to cut. I would strongly recommend that before you cut this, you do a test just to verify that you are cutting the right depth. Word of caution or word of note or something just to be aware of. ScanNCut does from time to time have a series of updates. This particular machine has not been updated yet. One of the things that's added in the most current update is a weeding box. A weeding box would be a box that is positioned just to the outside of your design to make it a little easier to remove the excess vinyl from around your design. We're going to now touch Start. And our ScanNCut is going to recognize its mats. It's going to cut our test cut up here at the top, and then it's going to stop. We are now going to grab our weeding tool and make sure that only the top layer of vinyl cut, and it did. It left the carrier intact. We can remove that, and we can press Start, and we are now ready to cut the motif. Now, one of the things that's really nice as well is with your ScanNCut, there's a great little chart that's included that gives you suggestions on which mat and which blade to use depending on what you're doing. And I keep that handy because I don't get to use my, my tools. I don't get to go to my playroom as often as I would like. So it's helpful for me, and I usually just keep that little chart right in the tool tray in the front of my ScanNCut.
That's a really good idea.
Yeah. Now, while this is cutting, the next thing that I would be doing, if I were in the privacy of my own studio, would be to grab my wafer light so that I have that light box to use when we get ready to weed or remove the excess vinyl from around our design. Okay, so I was going to call it an applique design. Our stencil design is done cutting. We're going to say okay, and we're going to unload the mat from the machine. So the next step is for us to weed this design. So we're going to grab that light box now because it is a whole lot easier to weed when we can see those lines. I don't know about you, but it is next to impossible for me to see what's happening here. So let's get our light box. So a couple of things that I want to mention. One is when you set up your ScanNCut, make sure that you register it. That way you will receive the notifications about updates. So things like the weeding box that we didn't use earlier when we cut this particular piece out. The other thing that I want to just remind you of, there are different types of vinyls. We're using an adhesive vinyl for this, or you're going to be using a stencil vinyl. The stencil vinyl, the sticky is on the bottom or on the back side. The sticky goes against your ScanNCut mat. That means the right side of the vinyl is up. You don't need to worry about mirror imaging or anything like that. We're now ready to weed or remove the background from around our vinyl. I am going to use my daylight wafer light because it makes it so much easier, especially with this particular design that has a lot of detail. So, you know, that little testing area is perfect for getting my weeding tool in. And I'm just going to pull that vinyl away from the design, and I like to work in one direction. Remember, this is adhesive, so it is sticky on this side. So we're going to remove as much as possible. You want to try to avoid letting it double back in on itself because then it sticks to itself. Back in the design area anyway. And what you're removing, it doesn't matter if it sticks to itself. So we're going to remove this one section at a time. If you need them, there are tweezers in the toolkit that was included with your ScanNCut. Sometimes that can be helpful to pull the vinyl up out of those little tiny spots. And with that new vinyl blade, I've been able to cut some just really detailed, delicate, little tiny things. Also be careful that you don't drop those little bits back down onto your file. You don't want to end up with them stuck somewhere that they don't belong. So when I'm doing this, I like to prep multiple canvases at a time because as Jody mentioned, you do need to let those canvases dry completely before you go back with the next step in the process. Your vinyl is not going to stick to damp paint. I like to set mine out overnight, get my cutting and my weeding done. Then the next day I'll go back and do the paint step, the top coat step, which we have not shown our makers yet. Okay, so our vinyl is weeded and we are ready for the next step on the canvas itself. Now remember, the adhesive is on the back side of our vinyl. We need to get that vinyl off of the carrier sheet and somehow onto our canvas. And to do that, we're going to use something called transfer tape. Transfer tape is sticky on one side. Okay, just as a side, and it's going to lift the vinyl off of the carrier sheet, and then we're going to be able to position it on our canvas. Now before we do that, with the example that we've been working on, I want to show you or give you some tips for these larger pieces. So this one was done using our 12 by 24 inch mat and a larger canvas here. And a couple of things. Number one, you do want to take this into your canvas workspace so that you can use the multiple weeding boxes. So this one added, there was a weeding line here, there was a weeding line here, I believe there was another one down in this area, and a couple of additional spots so that as I was removing all of that background vinyl, I didn't have to worry about it rolling back in on itself and picking up like any of these small letters or tiny bits. Okay, because once they roll into something that's supposed to stay, if that vinyl has folded in on itself, it is really, really difficult, if not impossible, to get it back into position. Now, with the transfer tape on something that's very long like this, what I found is that by rolling my transfer tape up and starting at the top and unrolling the backing and smoothing it in place as I go is an easier process for me rather than removing the back side of the transfer tape and taking that long sheet and trying to stick it down over the top. So it's a little bit like, for those of you that remember putting pantyhose on, you're going to peel that one section down and then smooth it in place. And then I would take my spatula and rub it over the top, and the spatula is included in your toolkit with your ScanNCut. And that's going to help keep the adhesive in place so that you can then remove this and your vinyl is going to come up with it and you'll stick it to your canvas. All right, Jody, are we ready to do that on our piece that we've been working on?
I think we are.
All right, let's get that next section done.
So now that Jen has weeded it, and I get to do the fun part now, you'll notice that we taped this down because it was curling up on itself. So by using the Floriani or RNK embroidery perfection tape, it's holding it down because I only have 2 hands, and it takes 2 hands when you go ahead and start working with the transfer tape. So how I like to do it is kind of the same way as Jen does. I like to set it down and little by little pull it off. Pull the white part off the back. And I actually usually do it in the other direction so I can see what I'm doing, but you wouldn't have been able to see it because it was curling up on itself. And now I'm going to take the scraper and I am just going to scrape it along the lines that were cut out. And because it's magic, it has completely lifted the design. Now, if I was not going to use this right away, I would have just left this on here because it doesn't really have a time frame that it needs to stay there. So the next thing I'm going to do is I am now going to put it down and place it on my board. I'm just going to eyeball this. And you just scrape it on. I like to do this from the back because if you push too hard on the front of this, you're actually smooshing down your and pulling your stretching your canvas. So if Jennifer finds a book down there, what's funny, we were talking about this, we both do this. Because there's a ridge here, if you're trying to scrape it, you're actually pushing it, stretching the canvas. So if you use a book to the back, that's funny that you do the same thing I do. Then you just come along and you just burnish this. And if I did it right, and I burnished it hard enough, it should pull up. Look at that. I don't do this really fast. So I have a part that didn't, so I just roll it back over, scrape it again.
And now for this project, we're just using this as a temporary application. If this were going to be my final product, at this point we would be done. So you can use the same process to attach your adhesive vinyls really to any flat surface.
We're just going one extra step on this vinyl. And this vinyl is reusable, so do not throw away its carrier sheet. Good to go. Yes, it does. And then I like to go ahead and burnish it again, making sure that it's not up in any area so that the next part when we paint, the paint is not going to go underneath. Now this is where the difference comes in for primed and unprimed canvas. This is smooth, unprimed canvas is not. And I was working with unprimed canvas all weekend, and I kept having problems with my paint bleeding underneath. So you want to make sure that you're getting primed canvas for that reason. Okay. So through the magic of Jennifer's painting, she has used acrylic paint on top, but there's also a couple of other things that you could use on top. You can use spray paint. And when you use spray paint, you start over to the outside and you spray light coats and stop to the outside. That way you don't get any stop and starts. And you do light coats, let it dry in between. And it does the same thing. I would use matte, not glossy. But you can use spray paint to also do this part. Okay, so now I'm going to show you 3 different brushes that you can use to paint your canvas with. You can stencil around the edges, and you don't want to use a whole lot of paint when you stencil because you don't want to have the possibility of pushing paint up underneath your vinyl. You can use a sponge brush. Again, you don't want a whole lot of paint on there so that you have the possibility of pushing it, or you can just use a regular brush. Now, this is like one of my favorite brushes. I've had it for close to 40 years, so it gets well used, and this is what I paint my canvases with instead of sponge brushes. But anyway, so you have 3 different options of brushes. So it's not really high technical tools to put the varnish, the top coat on. Next, we let it dry. I would let it dry for at least 4 or 5 hours. Again, it's acrylic paint and it needs to have its little bit of cure time. If you get really antsy, like I do sometimes, I start pulling it up like right away because I want to see what it looks like. And we ready for the unveiling? Find an area and just start pulling it up. See how nice that pulls off? Nice clean lines, which was not what I was getting.
The importance of primed canvas.
Yes, who knew? This is another part I like too. This is kind of like reading in reverse at this point. You can't really do this really fast because you don't want to accidentally rip it. But it's very important that you don't create puddles underneath or leave heavy paint on your canvas because it'll leave streaks and you don't want to get it forced underneath your vinyl if you happen to not get it down completely in one area. Make sure that when you are are taking this off, if you have any eyes in what you've done, that you do take off your eye, because you're going to look at it for the longest time and go, oh, something doesn't look right. Well, it's because you didn't take all the letter off. That's all there is to it. It's completely done. See how pretty that turned out? Wasn't that a fun project?
I know I had a lot of fun creating these hot mess projects, and I have several more sitting on my board at home. So I can't wait to get home this afternoon and stitch up some more of these.
I have a few lined up also, now that I know how to fix my canvas.
Exactly. So if you have any questions about what you saw in today's video, or you want to share photos of the hot mess canvases that you decide to create, or you need any of the supplies for your hot mess canvas, please contact us at info@meissnersewing.com. We'd be delighted to get back with you and provide you the information that you need. If you are just stumbling across this video and you're like, tell me more about these ScanNCuts, again, contact us at info@meissnersewing.com or give us a call at 916-920-2121 and we can help you select the right model ScanNCut for you. We'll see you next time for our next Wednesday workshop. So I hope you enjoyed that presentation. I have to tell you that hot mess is one of my absolute favorite things to do with my ScanNCut. Remember, like, share, or comment to be entered into our weekly drawings where there are valuable prizes that will make all of your sewing friends jealous. And we'll see you next time.